Well, only about 40 minutes stands between me and Fort Benton summer celebration, so. In our final session, two special guests will condense everything we've heard today, and they will boil it all down to, and you'll remember the movie with Jack Palance as Curly in City Slickers when he said, it all boils down to one thing, just one thing. And that's the one thing that you're going to tell us we should remember above all else, or not. Actually, we are blessed to have two forward-looking, forward-thinking broadcast professionals who can provide some perspectives on where Montana broadcasting is today and is headed in the future. Denise Dowling is the interim dean of the School of Journalism at the University of Montana, a position she's held since August 2012. Prior to that, she was the head of the radio TV department at the J School. She's joined the U of M broadcasting faculty in 2000 after 20 award-winning years working in television and radio newsrooms. In 2004, Denise was named the country's most promising journalism professor, and in 2010, won the Broadcast Education Association's Best of Festival Award for her radio news work. Under her tutelage, the radio TV department and her students have won a significant number of regional, national, and international awards and produced hard-hitting, meaningful documentaries and programs of interest to all Montanans. Brian Kahn is an author, journalist, and public radio host. Since 1995, he's produced the weekly public affairs program Home Ground, which is now broadcast over more than 50 stations and translators across the Rocky Mountain West. The Montana Broadcasters Association named it Montana's best non-commercial radio program, and Home Ground Radio has received other national-level awards since then. Kahn is the winner of the 2009 Montana Governor's Award for the Humanities. He's worked as an attorney, served as president of the California Fish and Game Commission, directed the Montana Nature Conservancy, and made award-winning documentary films. As a journalist, his work's been published in the Los Angeles Times, The Nation, and Field and Stream, among others. Oh, and he's also been a ranch hand and a college boxing coach, and who knows what else. In 2011, he authored the book Real Common Sense, a reflection on what it means to be a citizen in America today. And we're awfully glad, Brian, that you've decided to make Helena your base camp. So the two of them are going to finish it up today, and Denise, you are first on base. Please welcome them.
Thank you so much, everyone. It's so wonderful to be here. I have to, just because everyone's been sharing how they got started in the business stories, I just have to tell my story. I'm a Helena gal, grew up right here, and I had a high school radio show on KBLL radio when I was a senior in high school. I think it was called High School Beat or some other really clever name. But I remember that I took an on-air name. I called myself Denise Jacobs, and when I went home after that first radio broadcast, oh, my dad gave me heck. What do you mean you took another name? Who's this Jacobs person, and why would you want to be called that? When I was in college, as a requirement of the radio television department at the University of Montana, I had a 2 to 4 a.m. shift on KUFM radio when it was still in Main Hall, and I remember getting telephone calls from people and thinking, good God, somebody's up at 2 o'clock in the morning listening to the radio? And when still a student, that same year, in fact, I worked the sign-on shift at KPAX television. So I would get off the air on the radio at about 4 a.m., go get something to eat, and then sign on KPAX at 5 a.m. That was back in the film days. Missoula was the last television news market in the country still shooting their news on film. And it was, well, I have stories, but we'll talk about that later because I know everyone wants to get on their way. Thank you so much for sticking around today. I know it's a beautiful day outside and people have other places to be, but I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you a little bit about what I see in the future of journalism. I'm going to talk not just about broadcast journalism today, but about journalism in the bigger sense, because here's what I find as Dean of the School of Journalism, it's all coming together. Journalism in print, in broadcast, radio, and television is all coming together online. What I wish is that I had a crystal ball. If any of you know what it's going to look like in 15, 20, 30 years, would you please tell me? Because I think we could make a fortune together. It's really hard to know where it's all going. Here's a snapshot. I found some research by the Pew Center, the Project for Excellence in Journalism, and here's a 2012 snapshot of news audience. Television news audience is actually up. Online news audience is up significantly, and I don't think that's a surprise to anyone. Where viewership and audience is down is in newspapers and magazines, at least in their printed form. Mobile devices have changed the news landscape significantly. It is really boosting news viewership and audience because people carry it in their hands, in their pockets, in their purses. Technology giants are really angling to be all things to all people. In other words, Apple doesn't want to just supply your device. They want to be your news provider. They want to sell you your iTunes. Google wants to be not just your search engine, but they want to be the place that you go for your news as well. So there's a great jockeying for control online. News organizations, of course, are still struggling to find a revenue model that works for this new technology. And I think that that is the greatest challenge in the future, is figuring out how we're going to pay for journalism. And then there's this, social media. It rules the world. Nearly 9% now of online news traffic comes to the online news websites through Facebook, Twitter. That's up 57% since 2009. So significant change there in the way people are getting to their news through social media. 100 plus news organizations now have director of social media positions. And we're seeing a lot of our students go into these jobs because they've grown up with social media. They get it, and news organizations are asking for their expertise in this area. The average time spent on the New York Times, 30 minutes a month. The average time people spend on Facebook, 7 hours a month. So Ron Davis, you better get on Facebook, mister. Well, I'm glad to hear your stations are there anyway. Social media are considered a pathway to news. So on Facebook, you will see a friend or a news organization that you follow on Facebook talking about a certain news event. You're going to go to your local website, your local news website, the New York Times website to find out more about that information. 1.1 billion people active on Facebook. 1.1 billion. That's where your audience is. That's where you've got to be as a news organization. News organizations recognize this. Most of them have very, very strong presences on Facebook. Okay, Twitter. Do you remember when you heard about Twitter? I remember when I heard about Twitter, I said, really? What? I don't get it. I don't understand. Why would anyone do that? 140 characters to send your message. Well, there are 500 million Twitter users today. 60% of those people access their Twitter feeds through their mobile device. So it's not on computers, it's typically on their phones. 400 million tweets sent every day, and that company employs 900 people. It's worth $10 billion. The most followed account, you probably won't want to hear this, Justin Bieber. So a lot of it really is entertainment. It's estimated that there are 20 million fake Twitter users. So we don't know what's true and what's not. But I'll just click you on over here to my Twitter account because, you know, I do these things because I've got to know where the kids are. And I follow Slate, Time Magazine, the Huffington Post, New York Times, ABC News. I mostly use Twitter and follow Twitter for news. And you all know what Twitter has done in terms of news coverage. And let me figure out how I can get back to my little PowerPoint here. At the University of Montana School of Journalism, the very first Twitter project that we did in a class, we partnered with the law school. And when the W.R. Grace trial came to federal court in Missoula, the largest environmental crimes trial in the history of the United States, we partnered with a law school class and we tweeted that trial. As you know, cameras are not allowed in federal court, nor are recording devices of any sort, but our students sat in that courtroom and tweeted 140 characters at a time exactly what was happening in that trial. They had hundreds of people in Libby, Montana, who subscribed to their Twitter feed so that they could follow from work, from home, wherever they were, exactly what was going on in Missoula. It was fascinating, and this is when I got over thinking it was crazy and saw how Twitter could really be used for journalism. And it really has taken off as a journalistic tool. You all know what happened with Arab Spring. Is Twitter, and this is a quote from an activist, "We use Facebook to schedule our protests, Twitter to organize, and YouTube to tell the world." So Twitter, social media, has had a great impact not only on on the ground in news events, but as a means of distribution of the news. Oh, do we love our gadgets? 93% of internet traffic still comes through computers. 75% of adults own a computer, 44% own smartphones, 18% own tablets, but this is growing like mad. When you think that 25 million iPads were sold in 2011 alone, you can see how this market is exploding. More than half use their phones and their tablets to get their news now. And there's this 13% that own all three, and you can bet they're using all three at the same time. This Pew study talks about broadcast network news. And this is not good news. 50+% of the audience has been lost in the last decade for broadcast network news. Evening news down 3.4%, morning news down 3%, and yet 21.6 million still watch the news. That's roughly 4 times cable's programs. So network news still has a significant audience. One thing that is unchanged and it is a bright spot in broadcast network news is PBS. The PBS audience has not diminished at all. So they've still got a very strong following with their network news. Cable news, and I know as broadcasters we don't care too much about them, but I figured we should talk about the landscape there. Their audiences are completely dependent on news events. So when big news happens, cable news audience goes way up. Mostly because of the 24-hour nature. You can always get CNN, MSNBC, Fox. If there's something going on, you can tune in immediately and find out what's happening rather than waiting for your local news or the network evening news. Primetime numbers were up on CNN, MSNBC, and down on Fox, but Fox is still the #1 cable news in primetime. Now, cable has the advantage of having the subscription model, so you have to pay for your cable, so those channels get a cut of that revenue, whereas broadcasters don't have that revenue model that's shoring them up. Profits are up for all cable news organizations. Really bright spot in this research is local television news. It is still, by far, the most popular source of local news information, especially when it comes to breaking news, traffic, and weather. So this is where we turn for news about our local communities, news that really does impact our lives. Early morning and late evening numbers are up, where the early afternoon, the fringe times are steady. 4:30 a.m. is where local news saw the most growth. Now, I suspect it's because 4:30 a.m. news has just come on the scene. That these are the same people who are calling me at 2 o'clock in the morning. They're up at 4:30 watching the news, but that's where the growth is. Revenue overall, however, was down 6.7% in this 2012 study. And TV news websites gaining popularity, still not quite as popular as their newspaper counterparts in the local markets. Radio, stable, stable, oh so stable. 93% of us listen to radio at some point during the day. And when I say radio, I mean local radio, not satellite radio, not HD radio, your local radio station. I think the fact of the matter is most of us still listen to local radio when we're in our cars. That's changing a little bit with the younger generation, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. 40% of us now access audio through some sort of a device or through our computers. But again, we may be accessing our local radio stations online or through our devices. But services like Pandora, Spotify are certainly becoming more popular, especially with the young people. Traditional radio still gets the lion's share of the advertising dollars, and satellite radio is growing a bit. HD radio doesn't seem to have taken off with consumers at all. Now we have to talk about the rest of the story, because here's what I've seen at the School of Journalism. Our numbers, our enrollment, has dropped over the last 5 years. And what we hear from students who are perhaps considering journalism is that their parents are telling them that there are no jobs in journalism. And I think what the parents are looking at is what's happening with newspapers, because there are jobs in journalism. They're just not in the places that we're used to looking for them. So newspapers, unfortunately, weekday circulation down 4%, average of 15 papers or 1% of newspapers folding every single year. And the ad loss is what's really the challenge. Online advertising actually surpassed newspaper advertising for the very first time in 2012, but there is 10 times the amount of advertising lost to newspapers that hasn't been made up anywhere. So those advertising dollars are still out there, and advertisers are looking for places to spend them, and we have not found the place and the means to give them effective advertising in these other media. 100 plus newspapers are expected to launch digital subscriptions, and we do know that people are willing to pay for news because they will subscribe to their local paper, or the New York Times. They will pay for an app on their mobile for $5 in order to get those news services. So we know that people are becoming more willing to pay. We just have to figure out a way to get them in the house. This just happened this week, and I thought I would mention it because it was very interesting to me. The Oregonian announced layoffs, so this is Portland's major paper. They are going to a 4-day-a-week delivery, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. As they laid off 35 workers, they also posted jobs. They're reimagining themselves as a digital media company, no longer a newspaper. So I went to the job postings, and here's what I saw. And I won't read through all of this, but look at the second bullet point. They want people who know how to use these media tools: audio, video, photo. Audio and video we haven't thought of as skills that newspaper reporters need, but this is what is necessary in the marketplace these days. So our students need to know how to take a photograph, how to record and edit audio, how to record and edit video, and put it all online, because that's where, even if you're a broadcaster, you better have a robust online presence, because that's where the audience is. So how has the Academy responded? When I started teaching at the University of Montana in 2000, convergence was the buzzword, not just in the academy, but in the profession. So people were talking about cross-platform newsrooms. Newspapers and television stations were experimenting, coming together and working under the same roof. Some of it worked a little bit. Most of it was an absolute failure, because the cultures of newspaper newsrooms and broadcast newsrooms are very different. And it was something that I think was forced on them back in those days, and mostly it was not a good experiment. But we have watched and cautiously evolved as the industry has gone down this convergence road. And what we do is we emphasize the fundamental journalistic skills that these students, when they go into the job market, will need, no matter what platform they're working on, that they will need to be credible, fair, honest journalists. So here's how it looks at the University of Montana. We require all of our students to take these courses: media history and literacy, reporting, technology classes, ethics, law, and then they must complete an internship in a professional news organization before they can graduate. All of the courses incorporate writing. That's at the core of everything we do. Reporting with ethics. And real-world exercises. We make our students from their very first reporting class go out and cover the city council and talk about ethical challenges that come up in the actual doing of journalism. We feel that this is the best way to teach them, is to make them do that. Now, when students get into what we call the professional program, so we have a 2-year program where they're taking these required courses and then they advance into the professional program, they can choose to either specialize in an area. Say they want to be a print travel reporter. They can take courses in writing, international reporting, travel writing, and specialize in an area, or they can take a little bit of everything. So they can become specialists, they can become generalists. What we find is that employers want them to be generalists with a specialty. So employers want them to know audio, they want them to know video, they want them to know how to report on politics and the environment, but they also want them to have an area that they're particularly good at. So that's what we encourage students to do, but they're really free to do what they want. And we have more changes ahead. We got tired of complaining about K through 12 education and how students come to us not able to form a complete sentence, not knowing grammar, not knowing punctuation, not knowing how to spell. And it's incredibly frustrating. But what we found is that beginning reporting class, we were spending so much time on the fundamentals of spelling and grammar and writing that they didn't really get much reporting experience. So we're going to add this class. Well, yeah, I guess. I know, it is. It is, but you do. Well, right, and they're using abbreviations, and they think that that's okay to write that way. So, yeah, like I said, we got tired of hearing ourselves complain, so we're going to do something about it rather than waiting for our K-12 educators to pick up that slack. It's a big problem, and not just in journalism. I mean, it's a big problem. We are going to add a business of journalism course, because here's what we find is that students don't go out and get a job at the Montana Television Network and stick with them for the rest of their careers. A lot of students are freelancing, and so we want them to have a basic understanding of business practices. I think it's helpful if they do go to work for a broadcast entity to have that knowledge, but also if they go to work for themselves. We try to tell them that that's really not a good idea, especially immediately out of school, but some of them make a go of it. We are also creating cross-platform capstones. So any of our capstone courses, and these are hands-on courses where they're producing a product that's professionally broadcast or published. For example, the student documentary that students do every year and airs on Montana PBS now has a robust website with it. So there are photographs, there's print writing for online, as well as this TV project. So all of our capstones are becoming cross-platform because we feel that this is what the industry needs. Now, where is it headed? My daughter is one of these. She's a 16-year-old. This is their prom photos, so they've got their mobiles out. They're taking selfies, as they call them. I look to her and her friends to see what's coming. Here's what she's interested in right now. And I have to tell you, she reads the newspaper because we get the newspaper at our house. She watches the local news when there's something of interest to her on the local news. But for the most part, she doesn't have that appointment viewing that we all grew up with, that everyone sat down at 5 o'clock and watched the nightly news. That doesn't happen in our house. They are so used to getting what they want when they want that she will sit in front of the television with her laptop, and she'll be streaming video on her laptop. She has her mobile device next to her. The Twitter feed is going off all the time. People are really, they've got all their devices around them and they're checking all these different platforms. This is something that she's really interested in right now, and it's called Tumblr. Do any of you know this? This is Tumblr. It's a blog sort of thing, but it's got writing, it's got images, it's got photographs, art. It's very interesting. I don't really get it, but I'm paying attention to it because she is. I have to tell you though, my daughter, who loves music, and she listens to Pandora and she listens to Spotify, when she is in her car listening to the radio and her song comes on, and a DJ, her local DJ played it, oh my gosh, that's thrilling for her. And she said to me one day, Mom, why is it so exciting when a DJ plays my song when I could just dial it up on my iPod, but it just doesn't mean as much? So I really think that, you know, everyone's talked about that local connection. It's still alive and well with these young people. So here's the other thing that she's paying attention to, and I just, I put it on my Facebook page because I didn't know a better way to do it, but it's called Vine. And Vine is 6 seconds of video. 6 seconds. Most of them are really silly. I'll play you this one. Oh, I've got no audio. Sorry about that. I don't know where the audio is. And let me show you one other one that I saw that I thought was really interesting and creative. And this one doesn't have any audio, so it's okay. That's all it is. 6 seconds of video. Talk about short attention spans, huh? Journalists aren't really on Vine, but I'm sure they will be soon. And I don't know how we as journalists are going to use Vine, but I'm sure we'll come up with a way, just like we did with Twitter. She's also paying a lot of attention to Instagram, and I have not gone there yet, but I try really hard to keep up with what these young people are looking at, because this is where your future news audience is. So how do we thrive in this changing media landscape? It's really hard to keep up with. But we know that quality content, we know that local content will keep viewers. And Brody and I were just talking about this quality issue. The fact of the matter is these Vine videos are pretty low rent, but the young people are drawn to them. They're quirky, they have humor in them. I think I know, as a broadcaster, I'm so concerned about quality, and I want everything to be top-notch quality, and I think young people don't care as much as we did. They want the information, they want to feel connected, and that may not be in beautiful high definition. It may be something that was shot on a cell phone. I think that we all have to embrace the new technology and these new delivery systems, because if not, we're going to be left behind. What's difficult, I believe, is knowing which ones are here to stay and which are going to be a flash in the pan. I mean, really, who knew that Twitter was going to become what it was. I thought it was ridiculous when I heard about it. It's important that we build a cross-platform brand, that we're online, that we're broadcasters, that we're in print. I think that this will bring partnerships that we've never thought of before. I think Montana Public Media is a great example of how a partnership has come together with both PBS stations, the School of Journalism, radio, all contributing to this partnership. And I think that we may have to partner up with people that we have seen as our competition in the past in order to reach these audiences. And of course, the most difficult thing, the revenue model. How are we going to make that work? And again, if you have a crystal ball and you can see into the future, I would love to hear your thoughts. My sense is that online, mobile, on demand will continue to grow. There will still be a need and a desire for local broadcasters for the local part of their content. Thanks, everybody.
This is the end. It's a daunting challenge, I have to say. First, thank you for including me in this exceptional symposium. I didn't know what to expect, but I didn't expect this. This has been a rich, human, historical, educational experience for me. That's the good news. The bad news is it's awkward to be again reminded I'm the person that knows the least in the room. I want to thank Randy and Kirby for doing this. This just didn't happen. Where's Kirby? Is he gone? Oh, there he is. Okay, this took a lot of work. I thank you. Quick comment. I care about media as a citizen of the United States, and I am a critic of much that is broadcast on national cable and television in terms of the quality and what I think it's doing to American young people, specifically gratuitous sex and violence. And I make speeches about it, and one of the things that I say to the audiences who are about our age is, when I was growing up, our parents would never allow this sort of thing, never have allowed this sort of thing into their house. And either they were wrong or we're wrong now. But having heard what Dan brought into people's houses, I have to change my talk now, based on his worst movies of the world. One other preparatory comment. A friend of mine in the media heard about this symposium, and he tweaked me for saying, why isn't the print media involved? I mean, we're the senior media, you guys are young kids, disciples. So I thought it would be important at a symposium like this to take the opportunity to say publicly there's no competitiveness or jealousy of any kind between these branches of the media, and I'd like to prove my personal commitment to that principle by acknowledging publicly the important scoops achieved by print media that we've overlooked in the broadcast media, and I brought a few examples of major stories, and I'll read them in case you can't see them. Really insightful headlines. Homicide victims rarely talk to police. Bugs flying around. This is real now. I didn't make these up. Bugs flying around with wings are flying bugs. Man accused of killing lawyer receives a new attorney. Meeting on open meetings is closed. Only two more. Marijuana issues sent to a joint committee. And finally, statistics show that teen pregnancy drops off significantly after age 25. Okay. They're good, I tell you. Those people are on top of it. Today we have heard, and yesterday, wonderful, rich, and personal history of broadcasting in Montana. Like all history, it is the story of us humans, our amazing strengths and capabilities, and our serious flaws, interacting with the social, economic, technological realities of time and place, And it's important to remember we create those changes in social and economic and technical realities, and then we're faced with interacting with the unintended and unpredictable consequences that we've created. The charge of this panel is to look forward, and that attempt is always helped by looking back to see where we've been. And what struck me listening today is that what we've heard about are two things: change and continuity. Change. Last night I was looking at the Historical Society, that beautiful book by Christy Hager on Evelyn Cameron's photographs of 100 years ago. Look at the world she photographed. My mother lived to be 95. She died in 2007. She lived virtually all that time. Some of us here lived 2/3 that time or more. What phenomenal change in that period of time. Stunning, dramatic developments in technology, market forces, regulation, these are affecting this industry that we've talked about today, and demography. Such changes can only accelerate. We ain't seen nothing yet. Science moves at an accelerating pace. Applied science moves. And that poses perpetual challenges and opportunities to both private and public broadcasting. Little footnote. Change is hard for us. Bill Whitson and I were talking about this earlier. Psychologically, we're rooted in our childhood. We form our values in the past. Our past matters to us. So change, when I look at Twitter, in one sense, it's threatening to me. Is this worthwhile? I don't like it. If I don't like it, does that mean I'm obsolete? That's at a trivial level. The fact is, it's hard to make adjustments. So I was very interested in Bill's comments about the Greater Montana Foundation, looking back, assessing things that may have been mistakes, and looking creatively to the future. That is going to be more and more essential for this industry and this profession. The second, I said change. The second constant is continuity. The stories we've heard are stories of creative and entrepreneurial Montanans committed to the concept and reality of broadcasting. For some, it's been primarily a business venture, a means of securing a livelihood, and also and community respect. For others, a commitment to fulfilling a sacred public trust, helping develop and maintain the informed citizenry envisioned by our nation's founders. That's not just talk. That's what they believed in. That's what they bet the bank on. And very likely, for most, deep and principled combination of those two, a livelihood implementing a sacred trust. And certainly what we heard last night from the Craney family shows that Ed Craney, for one, was certainly a leading example of the last group. Earlier this year, I interviewed Joe Sample. He clearly also fits into that last category. He saw and seized a business opportunity, made it good, and clearly over decades he felt and still feels a deep responsibility to the listening audience, the public good, reflecting the key understanding that broadcasting is tied to the core of who we are as a community, a state, and a nation. And that quote that you read was one of the most astounding things I've heard, and I've heard a lot of stuff. That should be memorized by every student of journalism. It's fantastic. Don't tell them I said that. The 1934 Communications Act established the legal foundation for America's new radio industry. It granted private use of the public's airwaves and the right for profit from that use, provided the use was carried out in ways which benefited the public, and we've heard a lot about that in the last 2 days. The phrase "the public interest" is mentioned more than 100 times in the legislation. We've heard this afternoon about the serious changes and challenges facing this unique industry and profession. In theory, those changes can be approached from a purely business standpoint or from a purely public benefit standpoint, or it can be approached collaboratively, seeking out and building on that place where those two vital circles, business and public benefit, overlap. I do a lot of environmental mediation, and the secret to success of getting loggers and ranchers and environmentalists and government people to work together is to get them to understand their circle of interest, the legitimacy of the other circle of interest that they tend to regard in that situation with some antipathy, and say, okay, what can we do if we overlap the circles and focus on the overlap? And I've done it for 15 years, and it's among the most gratifying experience of my life. I believe the chances for a successful outcome of vibrant community in broadcasting in this state and around the country lie with that approach, consciously working together to sustain and enhance the idea of economically viable and socially enlightening broadcasting. The effort isn't easy. Everyone is intensely busy in this room and elsewhere. The world is not often a gentle place. But we are, in fact, a community of free, interdependent, and honorable individuals. And here in Montana, the human scale that's been referred to, the big, small town, the human relationships, we have a pretty strong track record when we commit to working together to make good things happen. I believe it matters. The founders' vision of representative democracy cannot hold without an informed citizenry, which can only exist with a vibrant and honorable media. Thanks very much. Thank you.
Well, let me hold you for just about another 60 seconds, and then we'll head on out. First, let me thank Brian and Denise for a really, really great capstone lecture. Thank you very much. And then let me thank, again, all the presenters who were here today. I got to tell you, we've never done this before, and I had no idea how this was going to turn out. The degree of excellence, in my mind, to what came out here at the podium and here on the bench behind us was just outstanding. None of you, blew this off or decided to do this in short form. I can tell a lot of work went into all those presentations, and I am very, very grateful. Third, I want to thank all of the Greater Montana Foundation Board. I mean, we put you through the paces and we whipped you to help out on this. I hope that you consider it to have been worthwhile. You mentioned a moment ago that Kirby did great work, and Kirby did do great work, but there's another person from the Greater Montana Foundation who did somewhere between yeoman's work and slave labor, and that's Sid Armstrong. And thank you, Sid. And back to Kirby, and to Kirby, and to Bruce Wittenberg, and to Kirby, and to Molly, and the entire Montana Historical Society. What a great partnership. This has just been absolutely outstanding, and we could not have asked more than what you did. And I know that partnerships are special things, and sometimes you have to work hard at them. I just didn't know we were going to have to work this hard. Bruce, please convey back to all of your staff our deep appreciation. And now, thanks to all of you, and I wish you safe travels and have a great summer.